But in today's presentation, I want to explore how the proportion of Brahma genetics impacts the reproductive performance of crossbred cows and the weaning weights of their calves. So, Bos indicus, So Bos indicus is a subspecies of domestic cattle that diverge from a wild ancestor a few thousand years ago in Bos taurus and Bos indicus. However, for Brahma, the story is not like that. So Brahma is a breed developed in the United States using multiple Bos indicus breed coming from India. Among those, we can include Nelore, Gir, and Gujarat. But similar to other Bos indicus cattle, Brahma also presents some interesting features. Among those, good tolerance to heat and humidity, good resistance to insects, and good tolerance to low-quality roughage. And among those, probably the most appreciated one is the good tolerance to heat and humidity. And just to exemplify that, in this data here, they measured the body temperature for 72 hours in purebred Angus heifers, represented here by the field circle, and also the body temperature in purebred Brahma heifers, represented here by the open circle. And they use it as measure of thermal challenge, the temperature humidity index. And as you can see here in this data set, the Brahma heifers were more able to tolerate high temperature. They were more able to regulate the body temperature when compared with Angus. And this enhanced thermal tolerance of Brahma makes them more adaptable to the conditions found in the southeast part of the United States. And as you can see here in this map, these extreme conditions vary from very hot and humid, and warm and humid. So despite the ability of Brahma tolerate heat and humidity, there are some traits that are not very appreciated in the Brahma cattle, including late puberty attainment, decreased carcass and quality and tenderness, and decreased feed efficiency. Just to exemplify here, one of those is the quantity of fat, intramuscular fat. So as you can see here, Brahma cattle present considerably less intramuscular fat when compared with other breeds. So because of these traits and other traits, the Brahma genetics here in the United States are more commonly used to generate crossbred animals that would be a cross between Bos taurus and Bos indicus. However, there is one question that remains unclear among these crossbred animals. And this question is, what is the impact of proportion of Brahma genetics on the performance of crossbred cows at breeding and weaning? So, and this question will drive my presentation today. And I know that is a very simple question, but at the same time it's challenging to answer, because to answer this question, we need to find a herd where the animals are raised contemporaneously, and we need to find a herd where we are able to find animals with different spectrums of Brahma genetics. And it's not everywhere that you will find these conditions. But there is one place, I'm having a hard time here, but there is one place here in the north central region of Florida where there is a Brahma Angus multi-breed herd maintained in one of the research stations of the University of Florida. And as you can see here, this herd is maintained under heat stress here of in the southeast part of the United States. And when I was in my postdoc, I evaluate the data of this Brahma Angus multi-breed herd. And just to give you a better idea, so this herd, the females in this herd are identified to each 132 seconds of Brahma, or approximately 3% of Brahma, ranging anywhere from 0 to 100% of Brahma, or they are also classified in 6 breed group, ranging approximately to each 15%, all right? So during my postdoc, I compile and analyze data related to 31 years of data records, and I end up with a little bit more than 6,500 females. These females were managed under approximately 90-day breeding season. I know that there is a range here, 51 to 142 days, but these variation were mainly from the beginning of the herd, and the animals were calving also at approximately 90-day calving seasons, and the calves were weaned at approximately 8 months of age, all right? And just to give you a better idea how the animals were managed, so the cows were calving between late fall and throughout the winter, but most of the calving events occur between late November and beginning of February, and the breeding occur between late winter throughout the spring, but most the breeding events was happening between early March and beginning of June. And the calves were weaned anywhere between September and October. And the animals were managed under grazing conditions, Bahia grass and Bermuda grass. And right here, between December and January, when the quality and availability of the pasture started to decrease, the animals were supplemented with hay and some sort of protein. And also here in January and February, the animals were also moved to winter cultivated pasture, rye and ryegrass. So pretty much they managed the animals to maintain the body condition score throughout the productive cycle. With that in mind, I used the data set to generate 2 articles. So in the first part of my presentation, I will explore how the proportion of Brahma genetics in those crossbred animals impact the reproductive performance. And to give you a better idea how they kept the proportion of Brahma and Angus evenly distributed in the herd, they submitted the 6 breed group of females. The 6 breed group of females were reciprocally mated with the 6 breed groups of bulls during AI, and the females were also reciprocally mated with the 6 breed groups of bulls when the bulls were put in the pastures. So with that design, they were able to keep the proportion of Brahma and Angus evenly distributed in the herd. The pregnancy check were performed 30 days after the artificial insemination, and the final pregnancy check were performed 30 days after bulls were pulled out. So, as you can imagine, from 1989 to 2020, the protocols range quite a lot. So they use conventional estrus synchronization programs, and all animals were submitted to the same estrus synchronization program. I just want to highlight this. And in regard to pregnancy per AI, here you can see the 6 genetic makeup, and as you can see here, the crossbred animals with proportion of Brahma, anywhere between 63 and 100% of Brahma, presented lower pregnancy per AI when compared with the other genetic makeup. Another way to see the same results is by performing a regression, where you have here in the x-axis the proportion of Brahma genetics, and in the y-axis the pregnancy per AI. So as you can see here, there is quite a variation, 52% to 37%, 50%, 15% difference. And again, I want to highlight that all animals were submitted to the same estrus synchronization program, and they were mated with the same bulls, so 15% variation. And then when we start to analyze the factors that could explain this variation, one stood out, and that was estrus response to estrus synchronization. As you can see here, as the proportion of Brahma genetics increase, the estrus response decrease, especially for those animals with 81 to 100% of Brahma genetics. All right? And I know that I don't have the 6,500 cows here, but it was because when I was analyzing the records, I was able to retrieve estrus response records only from 15 years of data. So that's why I don't have all the 6,500 cows here. And again, another way to see the same effect is by pregnancy per AI, as we all know, is much higher. In this case, was 3 times higher for cows inseminated in heat for those that did not as exhibited heat, so 3 times higher. But another way to see the same data is by performing a regression. So as you can see here, in the y-axis, again, I have the proportion of Brahma genetics and the estrus response. And look at the variation. Just by varying the proportion of Brahma genetics, the estrus response varied from 66 to 40%. And at my last year as a postdoc at the University of Florida, I was trying to understand why that was happening. And I was able to scan the ovaries of a subgroup of pluriporal cows, not that many, just 250 cows at seeder insertion and seeder removal. So what I verified was not difference on proportion of cows with corpus luteum at the seeder insertion, neither on the size of the largest follicle at the seeder insertion. And again, I just want to highlight here the proportion of animal cycling at the beginning of the protocol, which is a good indication that the animals were properly managed. Almost 70% of the animals were cycling at the beginning of estrus synchronization. And what happened at seed removal? So proportion of corpus luteum was not different across the 6 genetic makeups, but the size of the largest follicle was smaller for those animals with proportion of Brahma genetics above 63%. And why size of follicle is important at the end of the estrus synchronization program? It was already discussed here, and that this difference was 20%, but it was already discussed here that follicle is related, the size of follicle is related with the success of estrus synchronization program. And as you can see here in this relationship here, greater follicle diameters are related with the probability of estrus, and also the size of follicle is related with the moment of estrus. So larger follicles, greater chance of estrus response, and also the animals will come in heat earlier. So consequently, because those cows with greater proportion of Brahma genetics presented smaller follicles, they were having lower estrus response. So one explanation for that, it can be related with progesterone concentration during estrus synchronization. In this very nice study, they evaluated the concentration of progesterone for Bos indicus animals, here gyr, F1s, and Holstein. So as you can see here, the circulation progesterone concentration for Bos indicus animals were much higher when compared with Bos taurus and F1 heifers. And just to give you an estimation, so you can see here that the concentration of progesterone for Bos taurus was around 3 nanograms, and for Bos indicus was around 6 nanograms, so 2 times higher. And why is that important? So progesterone is inversely related with the pulsatility frequency of luteinizing hormone, and the luteinizing hormone drives follicular growth. So when they scan the animals during the estrus synchronization program, guess what? They found that the Bos indicus animals presented smaller follicles when compared with the crossbred and with the Bos taurus because of the greater progesterone concentration. So that is the principle for the development of this protocol that is indicated in the website of Beef Reproduction Task Force. And when they were developed this program, they were giving PGF injections at the beginning of the program. And as you can see here, just by giving a shot of PGF at the beginning of the protocol using the 5-day seeder, there was a 12% difference. So, and they evolved this protocol, and currently the protocol indicated for Bos indicus in the United States is this one. Okay? And what happened, well, now that we touched on pregnancy per AI, what happened with the final pregnancy rates? So the final pregnancy rates were not different across the 6 genetic makeup. So as you can see here, was around 90%, pretty good. But as we learn here, it's not all about final pregnancy rate. We need to know how the animals are getting pregnant throughout the breeding season. So what happened here, you can see here the time to attain pregnancy was longer for animals with 81 to 100% of Brahma genetics when compared with those crossbred cows with 0 to 19% of Brahma genetics. So these animals took considerably longer time to become pregnant. How long was that? So when we ran the analysis, we found out that for those crossbred animals, 50% of them were getting pregnant just at day 0 of the breeding season. But for the crossbred animals with 81 to 100% of Brahma genetics, they were to attain the same 50% of pregnancy, they needed 25 days longer. So approximately 1 estrous cycle longer. And unfortunately, it was not significant here, but as you can see here, I estimated the 21-day pregnancy rate along the breeding season, and at least numerically, as you can see here, the females with a greater proportion of Brahma genetics were getting pregnant at a slower rate when compared with the other genetic makeups. So, as a take-home message from this first part of the presentation, crossbred cows with 63 to 100% of Brahma genetics had the lowest pregnancy per AI, below 40%, because of decreased estrus response. Crossbred cows with 21 to 59% of Brahma genetics had intermediate pregnancy per AI. So in this scenario here, you can consider the Brangas, 45%, and those animals with 0 to 19% and 63% of Brahma genetics. Despite variation in pregnancy per AI, overall pregnancy rates were similar among crossbred cows with different proportion of Brahma genetics after a 9-day breeding season. So at the end, they were all pregnant at around 90% of pregnancy rates. And in the second part of my presentation, I follow up those cows to see how they were calving and how they were weaning their calves. And this was the topic of the second manuscript. So my final goal here is to answer how many kilograms of calves were produced per cow exposed to reproduction. That is my final goal. So in the second part of the presentation, again, in the models, I consider the proportion of Brahma genetics of cows. And just in agreement with the first part of presentation, because those females with 81 to 100% became pregnant at a slower rate, they also took longer to calve when compared with those animals with 0 to 19% of Brahma. And just to give you an estimation, here at the 50 days of the calving season, approximately 60% of the crossbred animals with 81 to 100% of Brahma had not calved yet, while anywhere between 40 and 45% of the other crossbred animals had not calved yet. So about 15% of difference. But there is another additional factor that was impairing these animals here. And we have to remember that the pregnancy length of animals with greater proportion of indicus genetics or Brahma genetics is longer. So approximately 8 days if you compare. So combined with the fact that they were getting pregnant at a lower rate, they also had longer pregnancy length, so that also contributed for these females being, for this female calf during longer periods. And just as we learn here, why we want our cows calving early, because they will wean heavier calves. As you can see here, there is an inverse relationship. And just to give an estimation here, so let's consider just this genetic makeups here. Here is the day 90 of the calving season. And if you consider here, there is a variation of 40 kilograms, just comparing the animals that calve at day 0 of the calving season with those that calved at day 90 of the calving season. And this is easily around 90 pounds of difference. And what about the weaning weights? So, as expected, male calves were heavier at weaning when compared with the female's calf. And we have a relationship here that resembles a quadratic relationship. So there is an increase on the weaning weights of calves as you increase the proportion of Brahma genetics. So in this window here, anywhere between 21% and 78% of Brahma genetics is where the cows wean the heavier calves. So, and now when we adjust the weaning weights, because remember, this group of cows here this group of cows was calving earlier. So when you adjust here the weaning weights, so you will eliminate this bias, and then you have a better quadratic relationship, because you are eliminated the compensatory effect of this group here. But again, the best results were obtained when the crossbred cows had anywhere between 21 and 78% of Brahma genetics. Overall, what happened here? So overall, here are the best combinations, and we want to avoid the extremes. I just made a rough comparison here. So as you can see here, the difference on the weaning weights here was 32 kilograms, about 70 pounds, and the 16 pounds for the extremes. And of course, a proportion of animals here were more Bos Taurus influence, and also a few calves here were more Bos Indicus influence. So that itself pair the performance of these two extreme groups here. And this is a weakness of our study, because we did not control for the genetic makeup of the calves. But with that being said, we can speculate other factors that might have impaired the performance of these two groups here. And one of those is the milk yield of the cows, that consequently impact the nurturing ability of the cows. And just representing here the birth weight of the calves, and of course the animals with heavier Brahma influence calved smaller and lighter calves. I know it's a busy table, but the only thing that I want to illustrate here is the heterosis on the milk production here. This is a very nice study where they compare the milk yield of Brahma and F1s and Angus cows under Bermuda grass and tall fescue. And the heterosis here demonstrate that those F1 cows were producing about 2.36 kilograms more milk. And why that is important? In this other study here, they compare several traits in calves, but the one that I want to highlight is this first one. They compare cows with high production of milk, low production milk, high production milk, medium, and low. And as you can see here, the difference was on the weaning weights of the calves were 16.9 kilograms, comparing high and low. High and median was 8.2, median and low 9.0. So the point that I want to make here, besides of the confounding effect of different calves, that different genetic makeups of cows had, we might also have different nurturing ability among those crossbred cows, and it's possible that the two extremes had less nurturing ability, weaning lighter calves. So that is the point that I want to make here. And just sort of on these lines, this graph here illustrates the 205 days adjusted weaning weight according with the genetic makeup and the parity category of cows. And as you can see here, the worst scenario is when you have animals that are 81 to 100% of Brahma genetics, and they are nulliparous cows. So, and of course, the nurturing ability of these cows varies just along the lines that I was discussing. But as I promised here, my final point is to demonstrate the productivity of those cows. So what happened with the proportion of animals calving? So no difference on the calving rates here, which agreed with the final pregnancy rates that I demonstrated in the first part of this presentation. No difference on the stillbirth. But interestingly, the calf mortality was higher for those cows with 81 and between 81 and 100% of Brahma genetic. And why was that? So just remember that the cows were calving between late fall and throughout the winter in Florida. I know that the winter there is not that bad, but sometimes we get some freezing temperatures there. And Brahma calves, they are more susceptible to cold stress. So it might be that this high proportion of calf mortality is related with the environment. It might be. And consequently, if more calves died, the weaning rate was lower for this group of cow here. So what about the productivity that I promised? So the productivity here I calculated in two ways. First, the non-adjusted productivity. And again, the same results. The two extremes were the worst compared with the middle. And here, I just did a rough calculation here with the differences. And in the second line, I adjusted for the weaning weight, the weaning rates, and also for the age of calves, just to be more fair, since these cows here were calving earlier, and these cows here lost more calves. So this is the difference, 40 to 86 pounds, 11 to 20 pounds. So as a take-home message, messages of the second part of presentation. So moderate to slightly high Brahma genetics ensure greater productivity of subtropical Brahma Angus cows. However, the productivity of cows with 63 to 78% of Brahma genetic started to slightly decrease. So to be safe, I would keep the proportion between 21 and 59% of Brahma genetics. And cows with 81 to 100% of Brahma genetics were the least productive because more calves die before weaning, and they wean lighter calves. Cows with 0 to 19% of Brahma genetics were underproductive because they wean lighter calves. Now, I have all the final results summarized here. And again, the relationship resembles a quadratic relationship where you start to increase the efficiency of the cows and then slightly decrease here, but it's still comparable with the other three groups. And the efficiency of this group of cows were impaired because of the lower weaning weights, while the efficiency of this group of cows was impaired because of lower pregnancy period, high pre-weaning calf mortality, and lower weaning weight. Now, consider everything that I just said with a grain of salt, because the study was conducted in Florida, North Central region, while I believe that the results would be replicable at the same latitude. I don't know if the same results would be replicable as we go north here, for example. Plus, another point that we have to consider, the animals were bred between late fall and spring, and they were calving between late fall and throughout the winter. But I don't know if you have a different breeding season, what would happen if this would be replicable. But we have a good idea what would be the productivity of cows according with the proportion of Bos indicus genetics. With that being said, I would be glad to take any questions, and feel free to call me or shoot me an email. Thank you.
In the suggested AI programs and all that, it talks about Bos indicus influence or whatever. What percentage is considered the Bos indicus for when we need to decide what AI protocol we want to use? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
So you were asking what protocol you would use with Bos indicus, is that correct?
No, what percentage of Bos indicus would mean use that one?
Okay. So the protocol that I just showed, this protocol here, they validated in Texas using Bos indicus influenced animals. I don't know the proportion of indicus on those animals, but I would say as you go higher, I would consider to use that protocol where you give an injection of PGF at the beginning and then leave the cedar for 5 days and give PGF afterwards. But consider, if you read the manuscript, the protocol is more efficient for animals that are cycling, because of course they need to have a corpus luteum to in order regress the corpus luteum, decrease the progesterone, and so on. So it might be with animals that are not cycling yet, the protocol is not very effective. So I don't have a good answer for you, because they validate the protocol with Bos indicus, but they don't have the proportion. I would say as you have more and more Bos indicus, heavy Bos indicus cows, I would consider to use that protocol instead of the other conventional ones.
You know, another characteristic of the Brahman, I guess, is poor carcass characteristics and poor meat quality. But there are Brahmins who have carcass characteristics as good as many Angus animals. Do you think there's enough genetic variation in the Brahman with respect to reproductive function, calf mortality, that we can select Brahmins to reduce some of these negative characteristics of the breed, or there's just not enough genetic variation there to change those characteristics?
I believe that there is genetic variation. I will talk about reproduction because when I was in Florida, I also conducted a study with purebred Brahma heifers, and I saw that the proportion of cycling purebred heifers, yearling purebred heifers, were around 5%. So I know that is just 5%, but there were some heifers cycling there, and when you see the body weight and the other characteristics of those 5% of heifers, they were not necessarily the heaviest one. So I believe that there are space to select better animals, and in Brazil they are doing that, and they are getting more and more successful in breeding early heifers just by selecting those early puberty animals and keeping in the herd. And I suspect that for the other traits should be the same.
All right, let's thank Thiago one more time.